Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Last Life Ever podcast. I'm Jillian and
And I'm Jeffrey Holst. And today we are interviewing, this is a little weird for me, to be honest with you, Jillian. Today we're interviewing a gentleman by the name of Jeffrey Holst. And Jeffrey Holst is going to talk to us about a charity he started in response to a tragic situation where his son Colin actually drowned in a pool. And we're going to do that just now.
Help me, my brother, can you lend me a hand as I walk through this land of confusion? If we give to each other, then there's nothing to take. Let's live life for the moment before it slips away.
Welcome to the show, Mr. Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Holst. It's a pleasure to be here. It's really my honor. So thank you for having me. And hello, Jillian. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being on. So you I hate to just jump right into this, but tell us what made you start this charity.
Right. So the charity's name is Colin's Hope, and we named it after our son, Colin. And sadly, I did not learn that drowning is the #1 cause of unintentional death for children under 5 until after our son Colin drowned.
Wow.
And yeah, it was, such a horrible tragedy, of course. And just to tack onto it, the frustration of not learning that drowning is the #1 cause of unintentional death for children under 5 until after losing my own son to drowning. That was something I knew I had to change. I had to get the message out there about drowning prevention and, hopefully have other parents hear that information from me and not after they go through it themselves.
How old was your son? Obviously he was under 5, but how old was he?
So Colin was 4.5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So I literally just learned this fact right now. So doing this, what you're doing here, you're educating me. I literally would never have guessed until you just said it right now that was the #1 cause of death, unintentional death of children under 5.
It's so surprising. Everyone I talk to, what's really interesting is a lot of people have, the numbers speak for themselves. They have drownings in their family, or they know a close friend who someone's experienced drowning. But when you hear that it's the #1 cause of unintentional death for children under 5, it's just not, it's not information that's readily available to us, and it needs to be.
Yeah, it's really surprising. And, I've read a little bit about your story and Colin's story, over the last few days, kind of getting ready for this. And what I found particularly interesting was that y'all were actually really prepared. I mean, he had just finished swimming lessons literally like the day before.
Right.
And then when this happened, there were other people around. It's not like he was swimming by himself, right? I mean, tell us a little bit about what happened, the incident.
Sure. And with water safety, we refer to it as layers of protection. And you need to create as many layers of protection around your children that you can. And swim lessons is a huge part of that. The reality is that at the age of 4.5, even though Colin had taken, swim lessons with his sister every year of his life, at 4.5, he was, you're just not a proficient, strong swimmer yet. And in hindsight, I wish more of what he learned was about water safety. And okay, if you get in the water, here's how to get out. And here's how, and don't get into the water without your parents watching, without them being hand's reach. So that's just one of the layers of protection. Swim lessons, we certainly talk about constant visual supervision. That is probably first and foremost the most important thing that you can do. But if there's ever any doubt, wear life jackets and put your kids in life jackets. My experience is people are, accustomed to doing that around boats and lakes, but do it at the pools. It's the thing about drowning that we came to learn is it can be so fast and it can be so silent that just don't take a risk. And, if a life jacket is, it can be what saves your child's life.
Right. So there were people around when this happened, and he had just taken swim lessons. Could he just not get to the edge? Was he in the middle of the pool?
Yeah. So this was on all accounts, a beautiful day. It was at a community pool or a pool at a facility that you had to be a member at. Colin and his sister and some friends, they were all at this facility at a day camp this day. Summer had just started.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Right.
So this wasn't at your house.
This was not at our house. And
Wow.
that is a good point. I think you're probably aware of this. Most children or most drownings are at people's homes,
Right.
at residents,
Right.
which makes our story a little bit unique. It was not at our house, but at this facility, it was a beautiful facility. It had a beachfront entry to the pool. It had water slides. It was a very crowded pool. I was not there that day. My wife and several other families went together. When they went to pick up the kids from the camp, they stayed at the facility and just finished off the day at this pool. And in addition to everything I just mentioned, there were lots of parents there. There were lots of kids there, and there was a full deck of lifeguards. So this drowning happened underneath everyone's nose.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I think that part of the story is the part that kind of it's kind of the most shocking in a way, right? Because you think I don't have children, but I assume that this is how parents look at it, because this is how I've always thought about it. With lifeguards and other people around, you can kind of let your guard down a little bit. There's all kinds of people there, and you just kind of assume everything's going to be fine. But obviously that's not the case.
Right. And so that's something that we, share in our message, is that lifeguards are there to serve a very important purpose, but don't think of lifeguards as babysitters. They're not the ones watching your kids. We did not think of them that way, but they're one of the very important layers of protection. But you have to do so much more than just count on lifeguards or anyone else besides yourself, really.
But let's talk about for a second. There's two parts to what we want to get to. The first part is, what should people do? I mean, in your situation, I don't know what more you could have done. You just done swimming lessons. You sent them with people you trusted, and this still happened. So what more do you recommend for parents to prevent this happening for them?
Well, it's a lot of the things that we talked about. Colin, in hindsight, I wish he'd been in a life jacket. That would have changed things for us. I wish we had more conversations with him about, I feel like all the swim lessons that we did do kind of gave him a false sense of security around, and even ourselves around, him being around water. And there's just more discussions that I think parents should have with their kids about water safety. And it doesn't have to be a scary conversation. In fact, the last thing we want to do with our water safety messaging is scare people away from water. That's not our intention at all. We grew up as water people. We love going to the beaches and the lakes. We just want everyone to get home safely. So just the constant supervision, keeping kids in arm reach. I mean, those are the no-brainers. That's what's going to, keep a lot of these drownings from happening. But several of these happen. One thing I tell parents: don't keep toys. Like if you have a home pool, don't keep toys around the pool, because you never know when a kid gets it in their mind to go get their favorite toy, and it might be near the pool and they might fall in. keep fences and barriers around pools. There's just a lot of information. In fact, I encourage people to go to our website, www.colinsoap.org, and we have a lot of this information there. But I guess I'm going to summarize it by saying just having water safety on the forefront of your mind. None of the information you'll see on our site or any of the safety sites is something that you couldn't think of yourself, or it's not rocket science, but it's stuff that we culturally, I just don't think a lot of people in the States think about it ahead of time. So we encourage people to have a water safety plan ahead of time, to take all these steps, to have the life jackets with them before before they leave the house. We encourage people, have your cell phone with you. Heaven forbid there's an accident, but if there is, you're going to need that cell phone or another way to call for help. And then, lastly, no CPR, because CPR could definitely be that final layer that if an accident does happen, it may keep it from being the tragedy that we had.
You just gave away all of the quiz answers right there. I took a quiz on the site yesterday. I was talking to Jeff about this right before the show, which is I think is really good, and I would encourage people to go to the site and take the certification quiz. Is sort of, what do you call them, a water guardian, right? That's what you're becoming there, and you get a little certificate with your name on it. I had to use a fake name because the system wouldn't let me use your name. No, I really would have probably. I didn't do that, but I mean, I would encourage people to go there because it's just a little multiple choice quiz, and it kind of highlights those points that you just brought up. So,
yeah. So tell me, there's a thing I always thought regarding the life jackets, that, kids shouldn't be wearing life jackets in pools because then it makes them dependent on the life jacket. But you're saying, no, if they're under 5, they should be wearing a life jacket.
Well, I think it's certainly up to the parent, and I understand, and I've heard the case that you just mentioned, but I wish that Colin had been in a life jacket. So it could have made a difference.
It could have made a huge difference, right? So I get that. So then how long after this event do you end up starting the charity?
Yes, almost immediately. We were in disbelief and shock and grief for a good while, but I needed something personally to kind of focus on. And when I learned that statistic that drowning is the #1 cause of unintentional death for children under 5, I knew what my mission was going to be, that I had to get that information out there. And so the idea of starting a nonprofit came to us very, very early.
Wow. Okay.
But I had no background in how to do this. I mean, so much of my background led me to where I am today, but it didn't necessarily make sense. Some of these experiences I had throughout life until I needed to pull on them at this time. But things starting to come together, and I started researching about, well, what does it look like to start a nonprofit? And I did what most people would do in my shoes, or back in 2008. And I bought some books on starting a nonprofit. And, I remember on the very first page, what one of these books was telling me is, it's going to be a lot of work. So if you really feel compelled to start a nonprofit, do your research. Make sure that there isn't someone else already out there that has done all the legwork, done everything that you're going to be spending the next several months doing in forming this nonprofit, because maybe you can just get behind them and support them, and not be, kind of competing for resources. And that made a ton of sense to me. And I really felt the importance of doing that. So I did a lot of research to see, okay, who is talking about water safety, and why didn't I have that message ahead of time? And it turns out, we could probably reel off 10 different organizations that we know do some type of water safety. But what I came to realize very quickly is no one was dedicated 100% to children's water safety. And again, the statistics, number one cause of unintentional death for children under 5, this warranted and needed a nonprofit that was 100% focused on that. And so that identified the need. I knew that this wasn't out there. There was a place for us, and it was the launch board for creating Colins Hope and, helping prevent children from drowning.
So, so you formed it shortly after the accident. So 2008, 2009, is that when you ended up starting Colins Hope then?
Yes. So Colin drowned in June, and we were incorporated as a nonprofit in August. So just the same year,
fast.
Just really, really fast.
Yeah.
And we talked about grieving just a little bit, and everyone grieves differently. And this throwing myself into something positive like Colins Hope and getting to say my son's name each and every day in a very positive, meaningful way was a huge part of my grieving process. Not only was I doing something very positive for others, but I was helping myself, and I needed that.
It's amazing. You sound exactly like our Memorial Day guest, Mike Pearson, who said to us that in order to properly grieve, he had to find some positive from the loss that he suffered. And I think I shared with you, and just for guests, or for viewers who might not remember, Mike lost his son to war, and then he started a charity to help veterans. So not the exact same situation, granted, but there's enough parallels there that it's really interesting to me. And I think that's a common theme. Like if you were talking to one of our listeners who suffered some kind of loss or tragedy, it doesn't have to be a child necessarily. Would you recommend that they immediately find something productive and positive to focus on?
I would. And that's something that has, it's one of the more difficult things that I do. This is not a mission of Colins Hope, and it's something that I do wearing my Colins Hope hat, but it's not specifically our mission. And that's talking to other families who've lost a child to drowning. And something that when this happens that I'm just very cognizant of is everyone handles it differently. And so some people would love group therapy, and that's what they need. And I just knew that's not what I wanted or what felt natural to me. But they are going to have to spend some time thinking about that positivity that you just mentioned, Jeff, because you're going to have to get that in your life somehow. Otherwise, you're just going to want to, never get out of bed. You're just going to want to crawl into a cave and never come out of it. But that's not our purpose in life. That's not what God wants for us, and that's not part of his perfect plan. And it's figuring out for yourself what it is to keep you going. And another big part of that for us is we still had our daughter. She was 6, and we knew all of our lives had changed forever, but she was still owed as much of a normal childhood as we could give her. So, she was what drove us to get ourselves out of bed every morning. And
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's beautiful, actually, because so many people, I think, when they respond to tragedy, shut down, or they get angry and they don't process it. And you were saying, I know I need to do this. I just have to. I have to do it for my daughter. I have to do it for myself. And this parallels something that actually I posted in the Facebook group just like yesterday or the day before, which is that I believe, and I really do believe, that every person has a unique calling, and we owe it to the world to pursue that calling. And we don't always know what it is. And then, so we have to find it. And sometimes for me, it took being diagnosed with a serious illness for me to figure out what I needed to do with my life. For you, apparently it took this loss, this tragedy. And I think sometimes that people have to have that to wake them up and get them on their purpose, their calling. And I hope for most people that that's not the case, right? Like, I don't want people to suffer loss or tragedy in order to figure out what they want to do with their lives and how to do that. But it's great that you were able to recognize that so quickly. It's actually shocking to me. I've seen people go through tragedy, and I've rarely seen anyone recover. I mean, I'm sure there was difficult times. I don't want to minimize that, but I've rarely seen someone just go, "Wow, yeah, I've just got to move forward right away."
Right, and yeah, and so everyone, would handle it differently. And I'm not saying my way was right, and even right for me, but it's what got us through. But I also had a lot of help. And, I'd like to share just a kind of a quick story, because I think it really paints the background and particularly why I was able to focus on the positivity. If you guys ever felt like you've had a guardian angel, have you had that experience where something just miraculously happened?
Yeah, I definitely have. And I know
Okay.
Jillian has too, because she's talked about it with me before. So
Okay.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so here is my I'll give you the kind of quick version of my story like that. But I remember the day perfectly. Is June 12th, 2008. And the reason I know that date so well is because that is the day before Colin drowned.
Wow.
And on this night, it had been like hundreds and hundreds of nights before it. We had a very structured home family life where at 5 o'clock, we'd have dinner together as a family. By 6 o'clock, we were doing our, family time. 7 o'clock was bath time. 8 o'clock was story time. Shortly after that was prayers, and the kids were asleep by 9. And that's just the structure that we kind of lived by. And with that structure, one of the benefits and why we really followed that regimen is because when we put the kids to bed at night, we wouldn't see them until the morning. I don't know that they went to sleep right away at 7, but they didn't leave their rooms. And they both had digital clocks in their room, and we told them, when 7:00 shows up on that clock, that's when it's time to get up. And so this night, June 12th, was just like every other night. We'd gone through all those rituals. And if anything was different that night, it was that I think Jan and I, my wife, went to bed maybe a little bit earlier than normal, just because the next day was Friday, and we were busy, or we were excited to get through Friday and have family time together on the weekend. And so we were in our bedroom. My wife was in the bathroom, actually brushing her teeth, getting ready for bed. And I was pulling the sheets back on the bed and putting the pillows in the corner. And something caught my attention out of the corner of my eye. And I looked out our bedroom door, and I saw Colin. And he was sitting at the bottom of the steps in the dark. And two things really caught me off guard about this. Number one, the fact that he was out of his room didn't even make sense to me, because when we put the kids to bed, we didn't see him until morning. But the second thing is he was kind of in this dark, kind of eerie place, very quiet and still. And it just concerned me that he was there. So I rushed out of the bedroom, and I asked him if everything was okay. And Collins, he just had a lack of words. And so I asked him if he had a nightmare, and he kind of yes. And so I asked him, well, do you want to, can you tell me what your nightmare was about? And he just didn't have the words for it. But most importantly, I could tell whatever had scared him wasn't even on his mind anymore. And he was just happy that we were together. And so I grabbed him by his hand. We walked upstairs together. I took him back into his bedroom. And I remember I gave him a kiss on his forehead. And I started to walk out of the bedroom. And this is the moment that happened for me. As I'm stepping out of the bedroom, two things happened. And I've only shared this story a few times, so it's I don't even have the perfect words to explain any of this. But I saw something and I felt something. And I'll start with what I saw. It was not a shape, it was just the shadows. It was just something in the room I saw, which would freak me out, but it happened so quick it wasn't a scary thing. It's just, in hindsight, I saw something different. But I didn't even have time to process that, because what happened next was this overwhelming feeling that just came over my being that, Jeff, Colin never is comes out of his room like this. This is your opportunity as a dad to go to his bedside. And I kneeled next to him, and I patted his head, and I patted his back, and I think he was already asleep by this time. And I think I did this more for myself than for him. But I think you kind of get the sense that this was the last night I had with Colin, and to have that opportunity was something I really needed. But it gets even better, and I'll wrap this up. But when I spent that time with Colin, then I went downstairs, and of course my wife asked me, well, what happened? And I said, well, Colin, I guess he had a nightmare. I took him upstairs, everything's fine now. So we continue going to bed. I think we read in bed for a little bit, and I do remember falling asleep, but I think it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes later. My wife and I are both awoken to this pitter-pattering of feet, and I can tell immediately it's Colin running down the stairs. And this time he doesn't pause at the end of the stairs. This time he just dives head first into our bed.
Mm-hmm.
And,
oh, wow. Okay.
yes. And so, I talked a little bit about the structure and the schedule that we had. And it's not that we wouldn't have loved the kids to stay the night with us, but we just knew the routine was, take them back to their bed. That's that's the routine, and that's where they'll be comfortable. But this night, and is probably because Colin had already come to us once before, we let Colin, sleep with us that night in our bed. And that is, I could count on one hand the number of times that ever happened. And again, it's not because we didn't want it. That is exactly what I wanted, but it just wasn't part of the routine. And the fact that I got to do that the last night that we'd spent with Colin, God gave me a very special gift that night. And, people will interpret that differently, but, I was on autopilot spiritually before losing my son. And, I went to church, did all the things, someone might do, but I didn't have a close, intimate relationship with God. And this was God giving me exactly what I needed, and telling me that he was going to carry us through this. And, it wasn't until several months after Colin's drowning that all of what I just shared with you became very, very crystal clear to me. But that's when I knew that God was revealing his plan to me, and letting me know that he was going to take care of us and see us through this. But at the same time, he had revealed his plan for me, and that was the drowning prevention piece.
Mm-hmm.
That's
wow.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I got a little teary-eyed there. I'm not gonna lie. So I'm sorry if I seem off. Jillian, do you have any questions for Jeff before we wrap up here in just a few minutes?
I kind of don't even want to go any further. I think I've taken a lot of things away from this, and that is that you have to go head on into whatever tragedy you're suffering, no matter what it is, and pull some positivity out of it if you really want to get through it. That's what I've learned here today. That's what I learned from this conversation, and that's what I learned from Mike Pearson, is that if you can run away from the tragedy, or you can succumb to being a victim, or you can pull something positive out of it, and that's better for everybody involved.
Totally agree. I learned a little bit about one of your sayings, Jeff, and that is, I think maybe you don't have a bad day.
I don't. And I saw this on your website. There's a quote from Colin, actually, where I said, "Today's a great day." And I thought to myself, I would have loved this kid, because so many kids whine and complain. And whenever I meet a kid that says today's a great day, I think that's exactly who I was when I was a kid, because I've always been that way. And I don't know why. I'm very blessed to have that. I've had bad days, but it's been a quarter of a century now because I made this choice to give up bad days, and I know that other people can do it. And I've gone through some tough stuff in the process, but every time I've gone through something tough, I've found some great benefit that's come from it. And I think it comes from accepting that God's got this worked out. I really think that's the trick. And that's essentially what you just said. You trusted that God had a plan for you. And by doing that, you were able to move forward and find this new path.
That's so true. And we have a saying, or something that I remind myself, is bad things can and do happen to good people. It's not that, this is earth, this is not heaven. And nowhere in what I've seen in the Bible where we promise that this is going to be an easy ride here on earth, but God does have that plan, and he will carry us through it. And in my case, he's given me so many gifts and prepared me that I really want to share those gifts with other people, because I realize not everyone has the same background that I do to start a nonprofit, and there's things that I can do to help them through their grieving process, and that's something that we're focused on.
All right. Well, I don't want to shortchange you here, but we are wrapping up. So what can our viewers and listeners do to support your charity and your mission? What's the best thing for them to do?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I'd love them to go to our website, which is www.colinshope.org. Take a look at our water safety information. Use it as an opportunity to talk to your family about water safety, your young children. Everyone's learned that important statistic tonight, that drowning is the #1 cause of unintentional death for children under 5. That may not apply to you, but it probably applies to someone you know. So share it with someone. Knowledge is power and will help save lives. We do have a quiz on our website. It's the one that you mentioned earlier, Jeffrey. It's www.colinshope.org/quiz. And it's meant to just be an easy introduction into water safety. And we don't penalize people for getting wrong answers. We nudge you to getting the right answers, because that's what we want you to have, is the information on how to keep your family safe.
And I passed, right? I think I did, right?
With flying colors.
All right. That's good to know. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it. And we certainly hope that you're able to continue to bring water safety and your message to the people for a long time to come. We'll do it. Jillian, do we have anything you want to remind our guests, our audience?
Yeah, we'll just stick around, because Jeff and I will wrap up the show, and we'll be back after this short little. Go!
So, Jillian, that was a great interview.
Yeah, so we interviewed Jeff Holst.
Wait, we interviewed me?
The other Jeff Holst that we interviewed.
So
lovely man.
Lovely man. Really enjoyed it. And you want to know something? I will tell you. He actually emailed me today, and now we're recording this like a week later, right? We interviewed him last week. He emailed me today, and he said, "Thank you so much for having me on the show. It meant a lot. I don't know if I'll get invited on another show anytime soon. I've been scared to watch the show, because I don't know if I did well or not." And I was like, "No, you did great. I promise. There's no problem."
No.
So Jeff, if you're watching this video, no, from one Jeff Holst to another, you did just fine.
You did great. And the charity was Colin's Hope. If you guys want to donate to that, or you need some water safety in your life, or you want to attend an event. I don't think there's a lot of events going on right now, but you can go to colinshope.org and find out more about water safety and water safety tips. And that one of the great things about that interview for me was how Jeff talked about how he just leaned in to his sadness in a lot of ways.
Unbelievable.
He was just like, he immediately took action to prevent this happening to other children. He made that his purpose. And he was just like, forget my sadness. I'm going to, I don't want to say fix, because I don't think you ever fix. There's nothing to fix. That is there. That's a broken piece of you when you lose a child. But he just was able to say, I'm going to make sure that no one else or as few people as possible go through this sadness that I go through.
And he talked about how he was certain it happened for a reason, which, I mean, you have to have some serious healing to be able to have that kind of statement about the death of your child.
Right.
Yes, it's been 10 years or 12 years, but I mean, and you could tell because he broke up when he was talking about Colin that, you know, that pain is still real and still there. But he also was like, I had a chance to say goodbye. He gave us that story about how one night, right? Just one night, he took the time to let his child stay in bed with him, and it happened to be the last day of his life.
Wow.
I mean, I was like, I was crying. I mean, I tried to cover it up, and I'm going to admit it now, so I guess I didn't need to cover it up. But I mean, I was literally crying when he was talking about that. I mean, and I don't even have children. I can't even imagine. Like you're going through that. We're doing that interview, and your son had just broken his leg like 2 or 3 days before, and you just gotten him home from the hospital, and you know, and I don't know how you made it through the interview, actually, thinking about that, because really Nikki is not that much different in age than Colin.
No, one of the biggest regrets I have is I was really adamant with my oldest child, specifically, of not having him sleep in bed with us. Like I wanted to have an independent child and just wanted him to be, you know, sleeping in his own bed, because, you know, most of the child psychologists said that that's what you're supposed to do. You don't let them become overly dependent on you, or a mama's boy or whatever. And so my first child, you know, never even tried to come into the bed. My second child immediately went to sleep with his brother in his bed. So the two of them were together. And then the third child, I've let sleep in my bed, and he's the one he's 5, but he's the one I'm the closest to. I have the best, he's only 5, but I have the best relationship with him. And I attribute that a lot to allowing him to sleep in my bed so much. He's just my little man. And so I'm glad, for one thing I can say about that interview is I'm so glad he did that, because I can't even imagine the compounding of pain had he not.
Yeah, and just to be able to look back at that and say that he was there for his kid that night when he needed him, and know that it was like, he even said it was like a chance to say goodbye. And I mean, in retrospect, that's like, I mean, to even be able to think that, it shows an incredible level of, like I said, emotional healing, but I mean, also, like, it's so powerful.
Right.
And it did remind me, and we brought that up in the interview too, it reminded me of how Mike Pearson talked about losing his son, and how he adapted to it. And it's just the idea that if something really traumatic or terrible happens to you, something really good can come out of it. Is just super powerful, and it's something I'm really passionate about. So I was happy to be able to share that story, even if it was weird having someone with my name on the show. Because it was. Imagine if we interviewed Jillian Sidoti. In fact, I'm going to find a Jillian Sidoti. So if any of our audience knows someone named Jillian Sidoti that's interesting and doing something cool, I want to interview that person.
All right. That's enough of that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Jeff, what do you want everybody to do?
I want everyone to remember how important it is to live the very best version of your last life ever.
Never gonna take my freedom. You're never gonna